Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, as you promised, the Democratic response to the budget. We had Lieutenant Governor Cawley. This week we have State Representative Mike Sturla. He heads the policy committee on the Democratic side. He has a lot to say about the Corbett budget. And then our all-star business panel comes on. You know what? I just might ask these guys. They know Rick Santorum well. What's that all about? We'll let you know after this break.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. We're sitting across from me, as often has been the case in the past, is State Representative Mike Sturla. He represents the 90, we don't care about these numbers, but it's in Lancaster County. Is that okay with you, Representative?
That's great.
He's the policy chairman. That means he's got to frame the Democratic policy issues. Now, we're going to talk about the budget, $27.1 billion for the second time. The governor recommended a budget below what the state spent the previous year. Democrats have had problems with all sorts of things in the budget. Representative Sturla, welcome. Now, to say you have a problem would be an understatement, right?
Well, I think so, yeah.
All right. Let me just parse it out. We'll go through this. The big thing I think that everybody commented on was the cuts to higher education. What's your sense about that?
Well, I'm trying to figure out why the governor doesn't want students in Pennsylvania to go to college. I mean, you know, I guess if you're wealthy in Pennsylvania and you know, you're doing fine, that's one thing. But the notion that you cut the state system of higher education and state-related universities, they use those dollars to drive down the cost of tuition for in-state residents. And this governor has consistently said he wants to cut those programs and those dollars going to those universities, which really doesn't make any sense. All of those institutions are in and of themselves economic drivers in the communities that they're in. If you think of a place like Shippensburg or Bloomsburg or someplace like that, and you take the college out of that town, that town basically doesn't exist.
Yeah, usually the colleges and hospitals are often in rural parts of the state. Go ahead, I don't want to interrupt you.
Well, no, I mean, and so you not only is it an economic driver that you're punishing, but you're also punishing every student that goes there that's a Pennsylvania resident that's now going to have to pay more in tuition in order to
now, I did
obtain an
exempt
education.
the community colleges at 4%. I mean, my sense, and you correct me, is that, you know, that vocational education, they do want to increase some money for fee, I guess, for certificate programs for occupational engineering. You're okay with that part of it? Go ahead.
That's great. Let's get an education for every citizen of Pennsylvania and get them the highest level of education they can attain. And we know that in this economy in particular, but has been for several years, that you're probably going to go back to school and get educated again and again and again several times in your life.
Yeah.
That's sort
Change
of
jobs maybe what, 6-7 times?
Right. Right. That's the nature of the way we operate these days. So I understand that and pushing that in particular for community colleges, but that doesn't mean that you just defund the rest of public education.
I mean, I want to move on, and let's move on. We're going to hear from all different sorts of people. You know, the business community, and we're going to have the president of PSEA. You know, in this program we get all points of view. All right, let's go to basic ed. You know, elementary and secondary schools in our state. I looked at this budget. There's some cuts here. There's some losers, winners, losers. Overall, it looks like it's flat. Now, would you agree with that, or do you think it's more cuts? Go ahead.
There's more cuts.
Make your case.
The governor said in his budget address that there was this urban myth that he had cut education. The reality is there's $1 billion less being spent on basic education than there was the day he took office. And that there's no refuting. There was not a single school district that got an increase in funding last year. That's called a cut. And the really bad part, I believe, about the cuts were the way they were made. The best example is if you go down into Delaware County, Radnor Township, which is a wealthy school district, got cut about $950 per classroom. You drive 15.7 miles down the road to Chester Upland,
one of the
poorest school districts in this state.
And what were they cut?
Over $28,000 per classroom.
Wow.
Now, how anyone can justify that one of the wealthiest school districts gets cut less than $1,000 per classroom and one of the poorest gets cut $28 is beyond me.
Do you think, and I asked this about higher ed, that the overriding philosophy here has to do with vouchers, essentially ultimately giving students a sum of money? I asked the Lieutenant Governor that, they're big supporters of vouchers. Do you think that's where the broad goal is, to kind of voucherize education, both public, or is that too much speculation?
Well,
I'm asking the question. I'm not saying they're doing this.
Right. Let's put it this way. If I were going to try and design a plan to destroy public education and turn it over to the private sector, I couldn't think of a much better way to do that than to simply defund it in the manner that they've started to do it.
All right, we're going to run to a break. I want to ask about some of the public welfare programs, and then we got to get into Marcellus Shale. We've not done anything since the legislature passed that bill, but we're going to pay some bills, and then we'll be back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by BetterSaferRoads.com. To voice your support for safer highways and less traffic congestion, visit BetterSaferRoads.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program. We're getting, I'm calling it the official Democratic response. I don't know if Representative Sturla wants to let me get away with that, but I'm doing it anyway, right, Michael? Excuse me, we've known each other for a long time. All right, let's talk a little bit about the welfare cash assistance, the program that's wholly state-owned, in which 60,000 people, will not be getting money. I guess these are folks who have some medical. Explain this to me.
Well, I mean, again, the governor has decided to pick on the poor here. Look, I understand that we're strapped for cash. There's a reason why we're strapped for cash, and part of that is that of the 43 states that have income tax, we're the lowest. Of the mineral states that have a tax on Marcellus Shale, we're the lowest, or any kind of minerals or gas. We have a very high CNI, corporate net income tax rate, but 70% of the corporations don't pay it. So I understand why we're cash strapped. But that doesn't mean that you should take it out on the most vulnerable and the most needy. And this budget, again, does cuts in the Department of Public Welfare. And I think that it creates that myth that everyone who is receiving any sort of public assistance isn't doing anything. We know that more than 70% of the people that are on welfare in the state of Pennsylvania are in nursing homes or have a disability. I don't know of anyone that I've talked to that says, you know what, let's throw some people out of nursing homes. Let's take persons with disabilities and tell them they just don't get an aide to come help them anymore. And what we're seeing is those types of programs being cut. And anyone, I mean, it's with the food stamp program, with the cash assistance program, mostly this is affecting children. There have been children taken off of medical assistance. We see families that are hurting as a result of these cuts, and it's just not an appropriate way to be
Before we go
treating
into
people.
Marcellus Shale for the remaining time, is there any other aspect of the budget you want to weigh in on?
Well,
what I've done here is ask you the questions that I asked the Lieutenant Governor to get both sides.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, I think the thing that people need to understand, the governor is now saying, look, this is just level funding. Well, it's level funding after billions of dollars of cuts last year. So it's really not level funding because the governor says, well, he didn't really cut last year. Well, he really did cut last year, and he's really cutting again this year.
Now, their argument is, and I do want to move on, is that what happened is that we used the stimulus money here, which was for one-time projects like the $1 billion in education. So what, in a sense, they're doing is they're actually increasing the state share, but people were told, don't spend the money on ongoing things, once and done. So, I mean, that's the response that I got from that.
Well, yeah, that's the response, but they did a budget maneuver where they took money that the state had allocated in a prior year, used it for something else, put stimulus money back into the prior year so that it looked like they were actually increasing dollars. I mean, it's a lot of budgetary gimmicks here that are happening.
All right, Marcellus Shale, you voted against it when it was passed. Finally, the House and the Senate got together. They set a framework. They're doing a tax. It's complicated. It has to do, it's on a formula with inflation and the price of natural gas, and debate over who gets to say you should have the tax in the first place and what municipalities play a role and all that. Maybe we'll get our buddy Scott back in here to chat about it. Go ahead. Give me your take on this.
Well, I mean, the bottom line, particularly for most of the people that live in southeastern Pennsylvania, where we don't have the Marcellus Shale play, we're not going to see many of these dollars at all. A lot of this gets returned to the communities that are going to receive any of the dollars off of the tax. But the reality is it was woefully inadequate and much less than it could have been. If we had just adopted West Virginia's law, our neighboring state, we would generate $1 billion more in taxes for the Pennsylvania citizens to use in projects here in Pennsylvania. But we didn't. And, you know, what we did was we set out parameters such that, for example, you talked about the price of gas affecting how much money we generate. We based that on dry gas. Dry gas is selling for about $2.50 a 1,000 cubic feet. Wet gas is much more expensive. So when you're getting
wet gas, what comes out of the Marcellus Shale?
Well, there's wet and dry gas. In the northeastern part of the state, there's dry gas, which you can basically take out of the well, put in a pipeline, and use it at your house for cooking. The wet gas needs to be refined. Now, it's the byproducts of that are worth a lot right now. But we're not getting fees based on that.
Yeah, the Scott I mentioned earlier was Scott Detro. He's the state impact guy. Maybe we'll get him on. I had a conversation with him. He did say there are some legitimate concerns that the business community does have about some of the regulations, and he's an independent guy, you know. All right, listen, I want to thank you. Maybe what I'd like to do is get your counterpart from York.
Stan Saylor.
Stan Saylor. Maybe we'll get you two guys on. You can thrash this stuff out. We'll do a little point-counterpoint. All right, coming up, we're going to get the response from the business community. Somehow I think they're going to have a different take on this. All sides of every issue on Pennsylvania Newsmakers.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back. We have our all-star business panel, Fred Anton with the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, Gene Barr with the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. We're going to get the business response, all points of view. Gene, let me start with you. I said when we had Jim Coley on the program, Lieutenant Governor, big business was a winner, capital stock and franchise reduction, no tax hikes, job seekers because of some of the programs that the governor has. Your takeaway on, on the budget. I want to do other things. Your takeaway on the budget.
I'd say jobs are a winner, and I'd say this from this perspective. The second consecutive year, we have a budget proposed that matches what we have to spend with what we need and like to spend things on. And yeah, there are a lot of folks out there who say, gee, we shouldn't cut, we got to spend here. So the question I'd say is, where's the money going to come from? Do you want to raise the personal income tax? We now have a corporate net income tax rate that, with Japan dropping their rate, when you combine our rate and the U.S. rate, we are the highest corporate tax rate in the world. So, you want to expand the sales tax? Where's the money going to come from in a time when we're still trying to recover? And all this talk, you'll hear people talk about, oh, gee, corporations don't pay. Corporations do pay. Those corporations who aren't making money obviously don't pay. You've got corporations that aren't set up to make money that don't pay. So we need to get money from somewhere.
The takeaway from you is you're happy with this budget.
I think it's a good budget. It's reasonable.
Fred, are you happy with this budget?
I'm happy with this budget. I think
it's
an extremely responsible budget. The trouble with the Republican Party over the last 20 years is They talk about fiscal responsibility, they promise fiscal responsibility, and then they continue to spend. They continue to spend money because cutting or holding the line is extremely painful. It hurts. Yeah. And the board members of the state-related universities are all going to be on the phone saying, put the money back in. They're going to all be on the phone. They're not going to accept it.
And you know, both of you, that the legislature reduced the cuts at the
correct.
18% for state-owned, 19% for state-related, in last year's budget. But this is the first governor in modern history of two budgets spending less than the previous year, right?
Yes.
Right now. Right. So you're happy with this budget? Overall, are you happy with this budget?
I am happy, and I'm saying this. The only alternative to this budget that's responsible is raising taxes. Now, there's no mood in the majority of the Pennsylvania House and Senate to raise taxes. As a matter of fact, let me expand on that point. The most responsible raising of taxes would be uncapping the gasoline tax to pay some of the costs of roads and bridges, and they won't do that.
That's the oil franchise tax. We've talked about that. Okay. All right. Good. We got this done. Let me, and look, we got lots of time that's going to go through the process. You two guys will come back before the process, and we'll get into the nitty-gritty of it as we go through. I got to turn to redistricting. The Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania threw out the maps for the state House and state Senate seats. And then on appeal, a federal judge has said, use 2001 if you can't get it done, if you can't redo the maps by April 24, but the legislature could change the date of the primary. Right. Man, Gene Barr, is this confusing?
It's confusing as anything. Trying to move the primary around in a year when Pennsylvania's primary could really mean something for a whole lot of reasons.
Give me one that I know.
One of them is we have a guy who used to be a U.S. Senator who's now doing pretty well in the polls. The other one is we have got to be sending out these absentee ballots for military here in the next couple of weeks. It's a whole other angle. There are a lot of moving pieces on this thing that are not easily resolved as we try and get to a House and Senate redistricting map that makes sense in light of where the population shifts.
Okay, Fred, Anton, we have about 45 seconds left in this segment. We can continue it after the segment, but what should the reapportionment commission, that's doing this, what should they do? Should they put it off until use the 2001 maps? That's the maps now in place.
They should use the 2001 maps. This is creating all sorts of chaos. People have moved out of their district, or other people have moved into their districts. There are 5 new legislative districts and 1 new senatorial district that would be brought into existence as a result of this. There's just too little time and too much confusion.
So we got to run.
$24 million. It will cost $24 million to have 2 separate primaries. They can't have 2 separate primaries.
All right, we're going to run to a break. I may come back to this, but both of these guys know a guy named Rick Santorum pretty well over the years, and we'll get their opinion about his phenomenal surge as we come back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, we're with Gene Barr and Fred Anton, our All-Star Panel, business panel. All right, guys, look, both of you know Rick Santorum. We're going to do a political science professors are going to come on next week and chat about this surge. Personally, what do you think about this? I mean, you know this guy.
Well, it would certainly be one of the more remarkable resurrections in Pennsylvania, or almost U.S. history. And here you have a guy who was beaten pretty badly in his last re-election campaign for U.S. Senate, who is now doing pretty well, surging. Yeah. Is it sustainable? Who knows? I mean, we're going to see. There's a lot of interesting primaries coming up. We'll see how that fares.
Fred, you know Rick Santorum well.
I was Rick Santorum's a finance chairman, statewide finance chairman, in 1994,
What?
when no one expected him to beat Harris Walford.
Right.
And Rick is a brilliant guy. Rick is a very good debater, very articulate on the issue.
He's done well in these debates. Everybody, even critics say yes to that.
The real weakness of Rick Santorum has been, in a state like Pennsylvania, too far to the right on social issues, too against the liberal trends of the day, modern feminism, gay marriage.
Particularly down in the Southeast, where even the Republican voters tend to be more culturally liberal, right?
But yes, but in the core of the Republican Party, which has been the voter base in all of these states,
right.
Mitt Romney, who is, I consider, a liberal Republican, will never get more than 30% of the vote, and 65 to 70% of the vote will go to the conservative candidate.
So, in a word, do you think Santorum actually can win the nomination? What's the answer to that? You do. All right. Now, I want to look. Business community.
Yes.
When he was when he was U.S. Senator, his relationship with the business community was pretty good. I know he was close to U.S. Steel, I think, and worked on bringing. What's your sense about when he was senator, what he did for Pennsylvania business?
Well, I think he was a good, reliable conservative business vote, pro-jobs, and we've had this discussion before about the way people approach it, the way different representatives, elected officials approach it, and we have a different fundamental approach than, say, President Obama. I think he's a good person. We have to end this demonization that we often get into. The reality is we just simply philosophically disagree on how you approach job creation.
Right.
Our view is it ought to come from the private sector. You've got other folks who say, we need to throw state, federal dollars at this to create jobs. We don't think that's the way you sustain long term.
Now, Rick Santorum, go ahead. Go ahead.
The industry groups cluster in various areas. We often think of the technological clusters,
manufacturing,
but we think of industry groups. Now, the big industry group in southeastern Pennsylvania is chemical and drug makers.
Right.
And Rick Santorum worked extremely well. He took a special interest in making sure that their interests were addressed in Congress. So he had a very, very good, special
I've
relation.
not heard that point before. You agree with that? But he also, wasn't he big on, we got 45 seconds on U.S., isn't he real helpful to the steel industry? Go ahead.
Yeah, I believe so. And again, Fred's point is a good one. That's where, the southeastern part of Pennsylvania has historically done very well in that. Some of the chemical stuff may slide, unfortunately, now with what's going on with some of the refineries there. But he's exactly right. The pharmaceutical, the biotech side has been strong.
We're out with the hospitals. Hospitals are a big business in our area.
Okay, thanks for the great update. We'll get you back, follow this budget. All right, thanks for watching this edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. We're going to do a Rick Santorum update in the next program with a couple of political scientists. We'll see you next week.